Good morning. You are, once again, we're joining me, Kelly Diamond, on The Conversation with Kelly Diamond. You can see me every Thursday morning at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Time, 9:30 Eastern Time. You can also catch my written word every Monday morning, bright and early, on globalwealthprotection.com. So last week, I covered the basics, broad strokes, 30-minute cliff notes of property right. And I wanted to challenge how you viewed rights in terms of their plurality or their singularity, because perspective is everything. Perspective is what's going to determine how you take action, or if you take action at all. If you perceive danger, you'll obviously be on your guard. If you don't, you'll probably put your guard down a little bit. Much like defensive driving, when you assume that everyone's an asshole on the road, you're going to drive a lot more defensively than if you assume everybody knows exactly what they're doing and is 100% focused on the road and totally cares about your well-being as well as theirs. In any case, this week I'm going to address the issue of corporate personhood. And it's a bit of a delicate topic when it comes to talking to libertarians or anarchists about it. And I will go on record right now to tell you that I don't advocate for the existence of corporate personhood, but I acknowledge that it exists in a statist society, much like saying I don't advocate for borders, and I don't. I wish there weren't any. They're a figment of government imagination, just like the government's authority is a figment of their imagination, and the only reason why it exists is because might makes right, and there you go. But I don't advocate for the existence of borders, but I know that they exist in a statist reality. So yeah, I still go get a passport, and yeah, I stop at the checkpoint and I don't blow right through the checkpoint, because I'd rather get to my destination than make a point at the at the stop. So I play the game in that regard. And it's not to say that you're not a principled anarchist if you go and get a passport. You should be jumping borders. Okay, I mean, I don't discourage that, and I certainly don't judge people who want to play that game and want to do that. But there's two ways to go about dealing with statism. Okay? There's going straight up off the grid. I ain't touching an FRN. I'm going full-blown agorist. And if you're not trading, if you're not paying in gold and you're not paying in some sort of virtual currency, I ain't doing business with you. I mean, you can go that route. I'm not going to use electricity. I have my own solar panels. I made my own sump pump in the back, and I use a septic tank. I don't use public. I don't use public plumbing. I know there are people who do that. And God bless them. I admire that. I do. I mean, I wish we would all do that. I wish we could ultimately just come to a place where there could be some sort of unified front where everybody says, you know what, this year we're not all paying taxes. 1, 2, 3, no taxes. That would be awesome. Okay, ideally, that's what we would do: is buck the system entirely and go about our business, live free. Okay, that'd be ideal. That's not what the situation is. There are people with families who don't want to go to jail. There are people who have better things to do with their life than sit in a jail cell. There's all sorts of reasons why we're not going to live 100% pure on the anarchist scale, and we decide for ourselves, okay, how far we're willing to go. So the perspective I want to offer you in terms of corporate personhood is not an advocacy for its existence. It's a perspective in terms of acknowledging that this figment of government imagination exists in our statist reality, to the extent that you want to accept that, okay? And working with it as opposed to against it. Now, you want to sit me down and school me on all the bad things about corporate personhood, I will sit there and nod along with you 120%. Come up with one reason why we shouldn't have corporate personhood, and I'll sit there and say, yeah, you're right. So I mean, it's not about convincing me that corporate personhood is bad, just like I'm not trying to convince you that corporate personhood is good. I'm telling you that much like borders, at some point, you either have to, if you want to cross one, you're going to have to contend with the state. And, and so in like kind, if you've got corporate personhood, if you never want to experience or take advantage of the benefits of corporate personhood, then you'll never have to cross that border and you'll never have to engage the state. Okay? But first understand what it is and what you're rejecting. And ask yourself, okay, if we were in a stateless society, would I have a corporation? No. Would I need a corporation? Not likely. Not likely. Okay, I mean, when you think about what an LLC is, it's meant to limit your liability. But the question is, who creates the liability in the first place? It's the state. The state creates a court system, a very litigious system, creates regulations that ultimately are imaginary liabilities that you now have to contend with. You have to pay fees to a regulator that comes in and checks to make sure you got 3 sinks in the back of your restaurant. I don't know if the average consumer gives 2 tin shits if you've got 3 sinks in the back, 2 sinks in the back. If the pH balance of your bleach sink is cool, they're not asking the questions. They want to know, am I going to get sick if I eat this? No, you're not. I made it the way I make it at home. I feed the same thing to my kids and they're fine. Good enough for me. That's a good enough inspection. Sell me some. Okay, that's to me how a general stateless society is going to work out. So the liabilities don't exist when there's no laws, when there's no state, and when there's no regulators. There are liabilities, but not to the extent that there is when there's a state. Not when you have a state that all but encourages people to be litigious, come after one another. Okay, so an LLC is meant to, it's exactly what it says. It's a limited liability and then a corporation. Okay. An IBC is similar in kind, except it's an international business corporation. But they serve similar purposes, and depending on the jurisdictions that you're in, they offer certain benefits. Okay. Now, corporate personhood, in and of itself, isn't bad. Okay. It's imaginary. It's only here because government says it exists, but it's not inherently bad. Okay. Just like a border isn't inherently bad. I have borders to my property. That's not inherently bad. It's how they're enforced, right? It's how they're treated. It's how it's now that they exist, how does that change the dynamics of human interaction? Now, in the case of my borders, if somebody comes over to my house, knocks on my door, I don't shoot them on sight. I don't ask to see their papers. I'm not asking for any sort of extortion fee to come in. I ask them what they want. If I want them in my house, they're invited. If they're not, I send them away. If they don't leave, well, that's where we come into, self-defense issues. But I'm not, my borders are not patrolled. Okay, whereas the country's borders, on the other hand, are inherently bad, not because the borders are bad, but because the state is bad, and they're ruthless about it. So in comparison, we see that. Well, corporate personhood is the same way. Inherently, it's not bad. I would say at best it's kind of like an inanimate object. It's like guns. Do people abuse the laws surrounding corporate personhood? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Without question, they absolutely do it. This is not a defense of corporate personhood. This is telling you that it's a tool like a gun. Okay, if you can use it ethically, you will find that you will benefit from it. And it's like saying, Kelly, do you advocate the existence of a tax attorney and a CPA? Not really. I would prefer that those occupations didn't exist, because those occupations only exist because the state exists. They're broken window occupations. All right? They're Bastiat-driven, you know, uh, broken window fallacy occupations. They only exist because the government comes around and throws bricks through our windows on a regular basis. Do I advocate for their jobs to exist? No, no, I don't. But their jobs do exist, and their jobs exist, and we take advantage of them because in the end, we want as much of our money back, or at least to protect as much of our money as humanly possible, right? So does an anarchist use a CPA to file their taxes? I mean, I would hope so. If not, I hope they really know what they're doing and they're itemizing the crap out of everything and claiming every deduction they can. Do you claim deductions on your taxes? Do you file your taxes? Begrudgingly, do you do it? Well, of course you do. And I don't, and I'm not judging. I don't think it's unprincipled. I think if you have a above-the-line job, the government knows you have it, and they're expecting a tax return that year, and you've got a family to support, your ass is filing taxes as you should be. Not because taxes are so freaking righteous, but because staying out of jail for your own sake and the sake of your family makes sense. Okay? So yeah, you're filing your taxes, and yeah, you're going to claim as much as you can, and yeah, you want as much of it back as you can, and you're going to prevent as much from going out to the government as humanly possible. That's the best you can do. That's self-defense. That's using broken window government jobs, government-generated jobs anyway, to protect your assets. The irony, right? The government's going to come after your job. Government begets a job that shouldn't exist in the first place. You go and occupy that private sector job to get your money back, right? And I see nothing wrong with that. You should be claiming every deduction you can. You should be keeping every dime you can. You should be protecting every dime you can. And so I would say, and I would contend, that corporate personhood is no different than doing something like that. If you're saying, I want to maximize the amount of money I want to keep, I want to maximize the amount of money I get back, I want to maximize the amount of assets that stay in my name, or somehow stay within my control and might not be in my name, then using corporate personhood as a tool makes perfect sense. It makes as much sense as hiring a CPA to go through and comb through all of your receipts and claiming every dime you can. Now, I will tell you that this is a huge evolutionary move. I don't know if you could call it progress or regress, but I started off saying that deliberately engaging the state is wrong. Do I engage the state as an anarchist? Yeah. Yeah, I use your public roads. Thanks. You have a monopoly on the damn roads, and I'm using them. Wow, you busted me in some hypocrisy. Right. That's the statist argument. Oh, well, you still use the roads. Yeah. Okay, well, when you show me a private competitor that's allowed to be out there, you can bet your sweet ass I'll be the first one on it. But in the meantime, I still got to get to the store. So yeah, I use your roads. All right? Am I a hypocrite? Yeah, whatever. Go have that debate somewhere else, right? But I have a CPA do my taxes. I file my taxes. We do these things out of compulsion. This is certainly not something we would advocate, okay? So I want to put it aside, and I really want to. I want the idea of trying to debate me on the issue of whether corporate personhood should exist. Put that aside, and take this from the perspective of corporate personhood already exists. Now, does it make sense for us to use it? It doesn't make sense for everybody. Okay, it doesn't. But I will tell you this: it's not reserved for the filthy rich, as people think. Now, when somebody starts crying about corporations going offshore and putting their money in tax shelters, I'm the first one to run to their defense and say, whatever it takes for them to defend their assets, if that's what you've pushed them to, and it actually makes financial sense for them to spend the money and make the effort to go offshore to protect their money, then the issue isn't that they went to protect their assets. The question is, and the issue is, what compelled them to do that in the first place? That's what you should be looking at, right? That's what we should be looking at as a society, and as individuals we should be looking at. What would drive somebody to take their crap offshore? Well, this is not reserved for large Walmart corporations and Mitt Romneys. Everybody seems to think that that's the only person who could do it. No, 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 no. I'm telling you, the poster child of middle class could be doing this right now. And it would still make financial sense. There would still be an ROI, and it is tantamount to claiming and itemizing your income tax so that you could get a return, or so that you don't pay it in the first place. All you're doing at the end of the day is using various tools to see how much money you can keep. And I will tell you this now, I liken this, and I call this the mail-in rebate theory. Okay, the mail-in rebate theory. The makers of Bear paint are selling their gallons for $20. But hey, if you fill out this form, cut out the UPC symbol, scan and do this, write this in there, put this in the right-hand corner, staple a picture of you and your mom smiling, give us a blood sample, mail it in, pay the postage, and wait 4 to 6 weeks, we will give you $3.50 back. How many people are going to do it? Well, my ass has nothing better to do than reclaim my money. So I will fill out your form. I will pay the postage. I will do whatever it takes, and I will wait my 4 to 6 weeks to get my $3.50 back. Now, the ideal is that you just give me the $3.50 off at the freaking register. Just take it off the damn price. But the mail-in rebate theory says, well, how many people are actually going to do it? We look benevolent offering this rebate, but at the same time, they really got to work for it to get it. And most people won't do it, and I'll keep the money, and that'll be my profit. Right? That's the mail-in rebate theory. Well, what do you think the government is doing? Mail-in rebate theory. That's your deduction. Mail-in rebate theory. Well, how many people are actually going to go through the trouble of doing all this shit? Not many. All right, then I'll just keep the money. All right? Understand that the most evil corporation out there is the damn government. You can't get much worse than that. Everybody else that you think is bad, right down to BP and Walmart, well, hell, they're government sponsored. My thing is we're all, the plebes are sitting here looking at them saying it's not fair that they have offshore corporations and they're dodging their taxes. The reality is, it's not that they're pissed off that they're dodging their taxes, it's that they wish they would have done it too. Am I right? Well, I'm certainly not freaking wrong, that's for damn sure. I'll tell you that people trying to protect their assets and successfully doing so should not be a bone of contention, but should be reason for applause. Of all the things I hate Nixon for, dodging his taxes is not one of them. That was the one heroic thing he did. So I don't understand the reluctance of so many to use corporate personhood as a state-issued tool. If you're willing to use their roads because that's their monopoly, and you're willing to file your taxes because if you don't, you go to jail, and if you're going to file your taxes, you're going to deduct every damn thing you can and potentially hire either an attorney or a CPA, then I will tell you now that corporate personhood is no freaking different. If you're going to get a passport to cross an imaginary line, because at the end of the day, it's more important to go on your vacation than it is to make a principled stand at the border, then I'll tell you now that corporate personhood is no different. This is not an advocacy saying, in a stateless society, we should still have borders and we should still have, corporate personhood and we should still have these things. No. It's saying you're in a statist society, deal with reality and work with what you got, but at the same time, don't give away free freaking money. Mail in for the goddamn rebate. That's what this is. Now, depending on the jurisdiction, as I said earlier, there are various benefits that you can get. And you can either stay onshore or offshore. Okay? But here is a warning to the American public and the skeptics out there who are listening to me. All two of you. The EU is a living, breathing warning to the American public on why corporate personhood is probably going to be your life raft at the end of the day. If you look at what happened to Cyprus almost a year and a half ago, I think it was around March or April of last year, there was a thing called the bail-in. Not a bailout, bail-in of the Cypriot banks. One bank was dissolved and the other one got to stay. The Bank of Cyprus got to stay. But how did they recapitalize the banks? They literally stole every single European dime over 100,000 euro out of every account, except the Russians. Somehow the Russians got out of there. I think it was basically Cyprus is going to be leveled to the ground and will be a European parking lot if the Russians aren't allowed out of this deal. Because there were a lot of rich Russians out there in the Bank of Cyprus. So they got out. But everybody else, right down to the Cypriot citizens, they lost their pensions, they lost their retirements, they lost their savings, they lost their liquid cash. The small businesses lost their money. They lost their ass. They couldn't make payroll. They literally went bankrupt because somebody went into their accounts, somebody being the EU and the Cypriot government, went in and took their freaking money out to recapitalize the bank. They gave all that money over to the bank in addition to receiving a bailout. I think it's technically called a loan, but I mean, so's our debt. I don't see us paying it off anytime in the foreseeable future. But it was literally, that was a bail-in. They took the money that was there and just said it's ours. But every bank can do that. That's the fine print in any bank account. It's our money. You're giving us your money. And when you ask to withdraw, when you write a check, and when you use your debit card, it's a mark. And the bank makes good on it for you. Okay? But look at the EU. People lost their asses. 70-year-old, 75-year-old retirees who saved their own money lost their asses. Now imagine if they had diversified and internationalized their money and moved it offshore somewhere else that was safer and more well capitalized. There are capitalized banks out there that we should be putting our money in that are safer than American banks, than EU banks. There are investments, there are holdings, there are places that you can put your money and your assets and protect them. I don't think there's anything particularly principled about leaving your shit out there dangling for anyone to grab. I mean, whether it's a litigious person or a government, if you've got your stuff hanging out there unprotected, you're kind of screwed. Now, I heard somebody liken getting an LLC to locking your door. It's not. Ace Hardware is a private entity that sells me a lock that they acquired legitimately. I'm a private citizen. That's as private as it comes. Okay? Corporate personhood is not like getting a lock on your door. Corporate personhood is like getting a CPA. Corporate personhood is engaging the state deliberately. Okay, so I'm not gonna try and make it benign, and I'm not gonna try and make excuses or be apologetic for it. I accept it for what it is. I don't like it, but it's there, and there are benefits to be had. And by golly, if I can get a benefit out of it, I'm listening. Okay, I'm listening. I'm not saying go out and register an LLC in your name tomorrow, but understand this. There is something to be said for having one. Imagine, and here's just one scenario out of many, and I'm happy to continue this conversation because there are plenty of scenarios in which a private citizen, poster child of middle class, could benefit. Here you go. You busted your ass. You finally got a home. Your kids, your wife, your husband, whoever. You own a home. It's yours. Right? It's appreciating in value. You've got a car, a really nice car, nice family car. You saved up for all of this. You busted your ass. These are the fruits of your labor. Here's the problem. Your title to these large ticket items are a matter of public record. So right now, if I'm an ambulance chaser, I'm looking up who owns that lovely Cheyenne, who owns that BMW, who owns that Mercedes, who owns that Lexus. Because the person who owns that Lexus has a kick-ass insurance policy that's going to pay out. They have assets. You're driving around advertising that you have assets. Okay? So, ambulance chaser goes ahead and starts suing and saying, oh, well, you did this, that, and the other thing. You have to pay my client for all these things and all these reparations because you have assets. I saw that here. It's a matter of public record. So you can afford to pay what I'm demanding. You can lose your ass tomorrow. Everything you worked for can be lost tomorrow on a litigious move like that. Fact. Now imagine if somebody is combing through, says, who owns that Lexus? Who owns that house? And it says Chainlink LLC. Well, like the company-owned house. I'm not suing a corporation. That's not worth it. I'll never get my money. They probably have a team of lawyers. And because that car doesn't belong to the driver, I'm going to have a hell of a time trying to see if I can get the driver to actually pay it. Okay? All of a sudden, you're not a target anymore. Kind of like packing heat. Everybody seems to think that because I advocate that people should be able to carry guns openly, that I'm advocating death. No, I'm advocating protection. Can guns kill people? Yes. Have guns killed people? Absolutely. Am I going to use my firearm to kill people? It depends. Are you about to grab me? All right. Well, having a corporation is like having a gun. It shouldn't matter to you unless you're coming after me. It doesn't matter. If you see me walking down the street or driving in a Lexus or walking into a big-ass house, it shouldn't matter to you who owns it unless you're coming after me. At which point, that's when you'll be met with that wall. But that's just one scenario. That's just how you could possibly use a domestic LLC. How you could use an international LLC or an IBC in this case. There's plenty of ways to use it. And this is not for multi-billionaires either. This is not just the Warren Buffett out. This is a tool that's available to anybody. And if you're willing to set up 401ks and you're willing to set up Roth IRAs and you're willing to set up mutual funds and you're willing to set up, and you're willing to go to the CPA every year, then it's worth asking the question, does it make sense for me to incorporate myself? Does it add an extra layer of protection so that all of the assets that I've busted my ass to acquire aren't dangling out there in the wind for anybody to pluck off my tree? The government makes it a very hostile and dangerous economic playing field. Okay? And for whatever reason, it created, in its image, corporate personhood. And whether it's good or bad, and whether you like the idea in practice or in theory or whatever, it exists. And if it's the thing that's thrown at you while you're drowning and it can float, I don't know if it's necessary to ask yourself whether or not this here item who's about to save my life is a figment of the government's imagination, or whether this is a legitimate private entity. I think the questions become moot when it's your shit on the line. So I don't know. It's a perspective. Okay, it's a perspective. Is corporate personhood inherently good or bad? No. Would it exist in a stateless society? No. Do I think it's necessary? No. Does it exist? Yes, it does. Is it a tool? You bet your ass. Well, in the case of corporate personhood, you're likely to save your ass. So, something to think about. Not advocating that you go out and get one tomorrow. But if your assets and your possessions and your property are important to you, you might want to think about it. Thanks for listening. Catch you next week.